All right, everyone. Hello, welcome to the session. And already a quick question to us all. How many of you have an AI assistant that could theoretically book flights, send emails, or delete your Slack channels? Show of hands in the comments. Well, wait a sec. Actually, don't answer that because your security teams might be watching. So, non human identities, aka NHIs, right, already outnumber human users in most organizations by kind of a factor of 1 to 50 already. And AI agents are about to accelerate that gap. So, I'm Yoad, and welcome to might be the most important conversation you did not know you needed to have. We are diving into the post cyber era, and spoiler alert, it's messier than we thought. All right, we've been securing humans for decades. Humans are predictable. They need coffee, they take lunch breaks, occasionally click on suspicious links, right? But AI agents, nah, they don't sleep, they don't get tired, and they definitely do not have employee handbooks. So, what happens when something that acts like a user but isn't one? That's what we're here to unpack for you guys today. All right, with me today are Ido Halevi. Hello, Ido.
Hey, Yoad,
Hey,
how are
buddy,
you?
good to see you.
Good to see you too.
So, Ido, great, buddy, great. Excited to be here with you. So, Ido is our director of product management, and he's the guy who has to figure out how to actually build security for things that did not exist 2 years ago. Also with us today is Ben Goodman. Hello, Ben.
Hey, Yoad, how are you?
Hey, doing great. Now that I see you smiling and all, thank you so much for being with us today. So Ben is our vice president of strategic alliances and corporate expansion. I would say spends his time talking to customers, having panic attacks about AI security. Gentlemen, thanks for joining.
Thank you,
Amazing to
Yoad.
Good to
be
be
here.
with you again. And thanks for the audience. And feel free to drop any comment, welcome notes. Tell us where you're from. We're really excited for this. And any question that are related to the topic, right? So, Ido, let's start with the basics because I know we have everyone here in the audience, from CISOs to curious developers that are watching. When we say AI agent, what are we actually talking about? Because my chat GPT, as far as I know, doesn't have admin access to my company systems, or does it?
Yeah, to simplify things, I think we can think of AI agent as a software with the goal. It can plan, it has a memory. Of course, it uses LLMs and tools to do all sorts of actions. Okay. And when
Mhm.
you think about AI agent, um, and specifically the difference between them and what we already know, is the degree of freedom that we want to provide them, right? So when we think
Mhm.
about AI agents, we think about agents that completely that just work on themselves, right? They might talk with each other to
Mhm.
create certain corresponding and certain logic, right?
Mhm.
And even in the far future, they might even learn just by doing very similar to how humans do. Okay. And although we are not there yet, I think it's almost like the autonomous driving, right? Where
Mhm.
you can already see the future, but we're still not there. But that's where we're headed.
So just to make sure, we've gone from AI is helping me crafting emails to actually AI writes emails on my behalf and send them. That's a pretty big leap, if I may. So walk me through this evolution that we're witnessing.
Yeah. So in the beginning, agents, if you remember, for example, the old ChatGPT, um, they made no actions. They were just input and output, right?
Mhm.
And as we
Mhm.
progress in the degree of freedom that we give them and the trust that we provide them,
Mhm.
you can see how much more they can do and how much more impact they can have. So right now, I think most of companies have some degree of freedom where
Mhm.
agents can do some type of actions on behalf of
Mhm.
humans or on behalf of themselves. And
Mhm.
sometimes they do it like in a complete autonomous way, but still have human in the loop. But we still have far like a long way to go to our destination, which is like a complete autonomous agent, right? And then maybe I won't have to work another day, right? I'll just can go and enjoy margarita on the beach or something like that.
Hope that day never comes. We need you, buddy. So I am curious. So I'm also curious about the human in the loop, but and about supervised and unsupervised AI agents processes. But let's wait with that for a second. I'm sure we'll get to that, further down the line. And Ben, hey Ben. So you talk to a lot of organizations daily, right? What's the moment, when they realize this isn't just a nice to have conversation anymore? Is there a specific case or an incident, when you can share with us, in this light bulb moment when the light bulb goes off?
Well, I think you're talking about a couple different things that I think are interesting. So first of all, I think when I talk to different IT practitioners, there's intuitively kind of like they have this sense when there are new technologies that are coming into the workplace that they just know they don't have their arms around. And, there's plenty of previous examples, right? Whether it be privileged accounts or when SaaS started proliferating in the enterprise or when cloud native applications started showing up in the enterprise. And, I think even without a specific data point, like, oh, I know there's this many SaaS applications out there that I don't have control over. Like a good IT person just knows, like they can feel it, they can sense it, they know it. And so, their kind of reflex is to try to put the brakes on it, right? Like, let's stop people from using this technology because I don't know how to manage it. I don't know how to secure it. But the problem with AI and agents and a lot of these new technologies is they're so powerful that a lot of organizations are saying to themselves, I'm more afraid of being left behind in not adopting this technology than I am of the security risks. And if you're a security practitioner, if your job for your life has been to secure the environment, like that's terrifying to you, right? And so what we've seen in the past is we've seen that like players will come in, dominant players will come in and they'll become dominant very quickly because they address this problem. If we think about how, Okta grew so quickly because they became kind of the answer for SaaS, or how Wiz has been one of the fastest growing companies in history based on their ability to address people's like latent concerns around cloud security. There's going to be similar opportunities that kind of emerge here in AI. And I think what's really important is that we have to figure out how do we give our customers, our prospects, the people we talk to, how do we give them the tool sets that allow them to feel like they have what they need to put the guardrails in place to fully realize the value and the benefit of these technologies.
Yeah. So what I hear from you, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, but if I may add, it's just I feel like there is also a shift in the mindset where the teams become more of enablers to the business than just the ones that are putting the guardrails and always watching that nothing bad happens. I think it's also an opportunity for them to shine and help everyone to just move forward.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I remember talking to a CISO one time, and she said, I'm so tired of just being the person that says no, right? Like I want to be known as the CISO that enabled capabilities. And so I think there's a balancing act here, right? Because what you don't want to be is just the team that says no, but at the same time, these systems are incredibly powerful and by virtue of that, incredibly risky. And so if you can do the work, if you can do the upfront work to put in place guardrails that do enable wide adoption, that do enable people to take advantage of it, that's kind of the win-win. And so just saying, hey, we offer technology that allows you to put the brakes on AI in your enterprise, like that's not a very compelling sales slick that any of us are going to build. But if we're going to talk about that, we're going to allow you to securely adopt this technology and use it in a way that is responsible and manageable, that's, I think, the thing that's going to resonate with most enterprises.
I must say that I was expecting more of that organization are discovering AI agent usage kind of in the hard way because it's still because it's a very new technology. But you're depicting a very positive picture, which is really, really interesting in my opinion. I want to take this forward, please, and kind of double click on a key topic here. So, Ido, something that has been, bugging me for a while. We have, let's imagine, we know we have an identity system for humans, right? We have device management for endpoints, for servers, for machines. But AI agents, they're not people. They're not just machines, right? They're decision-making identities. How, in your opinion, buddy, how would you think about them from an identity perspective?
Yeah, and I understand the confusion, right? If you look at, for example, some of the co-pilots that Dev has, like I think it's called Devin AI, it even got like a human name, right? And it acts and performs like almost like a developer or a junior developer does, where you send it, you give it a task, it creates a pull request, and then someone can review it and decide whether to push it to production or not. But eventually, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if we think of them as humans or NHI. I think the most important part is to treat them as a first-class identity, right? And to understand their capabilities and limitations in order to put the right governance, or to put the right posture, to understand the risk, to put the right security controls, so you can do it in a safe manner.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we're
Yes,
identity people. We're identity people, right? Like we're people walking around with hammers, and so things look like nails to us. But that said, it's when you look at the way an agent acts, it acts different than things we've talked about in the past. And but we'll start. Humans are inherently pattern matching individuals, right? We find patterns that make sense to us, and what we start to see when we see how an agent performs is we start to see patterns that look like an identity. And so maybe some of the things that we've learned over the last, let's say, 25 years about how we manage identities can now be applied to agents. You don't always have to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes you just have to make minor modifications. And so I think, yes, we see everything through an identity prism or an identity lens, but that doesn't mean it's not the right one for this particular scenario.
Yeah, and Ben and I talked about it a lot, where we see almost like two types of modules to classify them. Where one, you have the autonomous agent, and then you have the on behalf of agent, and each one deserves its own unique treatment, let's say. But the pillars to protect each one of them are pretty much the same.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about on behalf of, like, that's a relationship, right? And relationship is fundamentally an identity concept, right? And so many of the things we'll talk about, sometimes when you talk about it, you don't think of it in the context of identity. But if you take a step back and you say, hey, you know what? This is an identity concept here. On behalf of is a relationship. Relationship is an identity concept. We have concepts and theories and mechanisms that we use to manage these types of things. So let's lean into those, and then let's evolve them and adapt them to this new world.
Interesting. So when we talk about new world, and thanks for using that term, because it really I want to make sure we are covered with a specific topic. So Ben, I want to hear what you're thinking about. We have something called the post-cyber era. So I want you to help me understand what that means, and let me use a quote that I read on somewhere in the internet a couple of days ago. So in the post-cyber era, our adversaries are not only human but autonomous agents, and we must secure these decision-making identities. What do you think about that?
It's an interesting point. I think there's a couple things to think about with that. So first of all, I think we have to think about how do we quote unquote secure an agent. And security people, kind of our first reflex, if you will, is to always think of things from a malicious or adversarial intent, right? So I'm a human. And as a human, I present a certain amount. By the way, I'm a human. This is I present a certain amount of attack surface, right? Right. My attack surface is people will try to phish me. The devices I'm on, the applications I log into, my actual authentication itself. Those are all pieces of attack surface, right? And all of a sudden, with agents and LLMs and GPTs, we have this new kind of latent attack surface that's arising, right? And so as people that, security practitioners, our primary goal is to reduce attack surface as much as possible and to manage it and secure it where we can, right? And so the first thing I think of is okay, how am I going to manage and secure this new attack surface around agents, especially when it's incredibly fast moving? An agent may exist right now, and it may not exist a couple seconds from now. A new agent may exist a minute from now, and then it may not exist again. And so, this is a new, highly dynamic, highly changing attack surface that I have to figure out how to get my arms around. So that's the first thing that I think security practitioners are feeling in the back of their brain. That's like poking them like an ice pick, and they're thinking, how am I going to secure that? The second component is actually the non-malicious intent, right? So agents are based on LLMs, which are fundamentally non-deterministic, right? And so they do things that we don't expect. I mean, everyone on this has asked a question to, a chat interface that sits on top of an LLM, and they get a response, and then they ask the same exact question to it again, and they get a completely different response, right? And so, this non-deterministic nature makes it very unpredictable. And by the way, we talked about the fact that humans are pattern matchers. This is like a pattern that's constantly changing, which makes it really, really hard. So we need to not just secure ourselves against attack, including attack that could potentially be AI in nature or AI driven or AI powered. But we also need to prepare ourselves for people that are acting with complete good intentions that accidentally could leak corporate IP, PII, PHI, regulated data, because they've provided that information to an LLM and they don't have the guardrails that protect it. So
let me just continue here. So this is to me, it sounds like what used to be called the insider threat on steroids, right? But let's imagine a scenario. I want to develop this idea. So if we're practical for a second, we give an AI agent permission to manage a calendar. So what could go wrong? Don't just say everything like we're all thinking about.
Yeah. Well, maybe not everything when we're talking about a calendar, but I think it all ties back to what we were just talking about, right? The predictability of how that agent is going to perform and what it's going to do and what is attackable are the things that I worry about as a security practitioner. I think the other thing that's, the worst case scenario, if an AI agent has access to my calendar, is that it creates events that I really don't want, or shares my availability with someone I don't want to know it. So it's a pretty small blast radius, if you will.
But just imagine if it starts sharing, board meetings that you're invited to, because it acts like on a best effort practice.
Sure, but where it really becomes concerning is what happens when I start sharing access to my CRM or my ERP system, or to my systems with personal health information or PII or things like that. And there's here in the US, there's it's football season now, and there was a commercial. It was an IBM commercial that I saw this weekend where they talked about the fact that they were asking their AI questions and it was giving generic answers. And the response was, well, that's because we don't give it access to our corporate information. And so, if you want to get the full power of these systems, you're going to have to give it access to where the data is that it can actually act on, that it can actually learn on. And so if we want to get the full power of these systems, we have to figure out how to securely allow them to get this access and how to manage it, how to understand it, how to monitor it, and all of those other components. Governance, all these things are really important if we want to get the full value of them.
Well, we'll get to governance in a second, but I just want to expand on that because it gets me, worried a little bit. So I'm thinking about a nightmare scenario, like an autonomous agent takes or makes 10,000 decisions while I'm getting my coffee. How do we maintain any kind of semblance of control when things move at machine speed? So Ido, I want to hear your opinion about that.
Yeah, so maybe just to add to that, and just, sorry, I can very relate with what Ben said before, but it's not only the 10,000s of decisions that it can make, but also the speed, right? We understand that it's faster than anything we've seen before. And I think also the amount of data that it can process in order to get to that decision that we might not even understand, right? We have some blind spot into how that thing made the decision to do whatever it needs to do, because eventually, like we started with, it has a goal, it has a few tools, it has a memory, and it has access to the LLM, right? And then it just needs to accomplish the goal no matter what. And just like people will find workaround, agents can find workaround as well, right? So it's not only the number of decisions, but also the nature of how the agent is architectured and how it works, right? And
actually,
I totally
just a really quick point on that. You just made a really good point. So much of these agents are really, I keep talking about humans are pattern matchers. Well, guess what? AIs are like the ultimate pattern matchers, right? They're finding patterns in the data we provide to it. So part of the thing is we want to make sure that the pattern it's going to find is consistent with the data we give it. Potentially we don't want it to include some piece of data like private data or corporate data in the pattern, because that is where you could secretly or accidentally leak information you don't want to get out there by basically training an AI on something that you don't want it to tell people.
Yeah.
So I want to expand here about something Ido mentioned in the beginning, and I promise we'll get back to that. I think it's a good time, like the human in the loop. So human in the loop, is that some kind of a solution to that speed and the amount of decision needed to be taken, or we might be just slowing everything down?
So I think it depends, but I don't want to provide the obvious answer, I guess.
No, go obvious. It's okay. Go obvious.
No, but I like to split it between the things that we know and the things that we don't know, right? And we understand that there is so much that we still don't know on how this is gonna perform and act. That I think we should focus on where we can right now, right? And some things that are pretty obvious, like we mentioned, like consider it as a first-class identity. Make sure you can discover all your agent, that you have the right type of visibility, right? That the access fits the scope that it should be getting, etc., 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 and governance, of course, and so on and so forth. And I think eventually we'll trust those things more and more and more, and the freedom that they will get will be much higher, right? And it's a play here because like I mentioned in the beginning, right? When we think about AI agent, we think about the end result, and this speaks to like a huge degree of freedom.
Sorry, what's the end result in that case?
Where agents have full freedom, right? They can interact with other agents. They can learn on the way, right? And it's almost like a counterbalance between the amount of freedom that we want to give this type of new identity and the productivity gains or the gains that we're trying to get out of them, right? And finding the right balance, I think that's the important thing. And to get back to your human in the loop, I guess that in the beginning we'll use human in the loops where we feel like the risk is very, very, very high, right? But even then, humans will usually forget over time and get accustomed to the technology. So I guess is that better practices like just-in-time access and maybe other things. I've heard of people talking about AI watching AIs, right? Those are things that we should be open for in terms of how we, let's say, approve or provide access to those identities.
No, really interesting. Really, I just want to. Real quick one. I just want to be aware of time. Sorry, Ben. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think human in the loop, generally speaking, is a really good compromise for how we can, kind of set an agent out working and then bring it back and potentially have it check with a human on certain things. I think the thing that we have to always think about is fatigue, right? So you could certainly slow down the AI, but if the AI is constantly coming back at machine speeds and asking humans questions, like there's going to be a fatigue factor that comes back as well, similar to what we talked about with MFA fatigue, right? When you're constantly prompting people for multi-factor authentication. Like if the AI is constantly coming back and saying, is it okay for me to do this? Is it okay for me to do this? Eventually people are just going to go, yes, already, just go. And so, you have to find that compromise where it's coming back for things that are actually adding value or actually adding security without just constantly asking the human, to which case eventually it'll become worthless, right? Because the human will just start hitting yes every time.
It's really interesting, the moment we mention humans, the word fatigue comes up, and then it's like kind of inevitable, right? So And I also hear, Ido, from what you previously mentioned, a lot of governance, a lot of trust, and I'm sure I want to double click on that, but want to just dive into a different. I want to test the framework for a second. We'll get back to governance and trust because this is really sounds like a real key to unpack this. Ben, this goes to you. I wanna test something, a framework with our audience, right? So picture this like a ladder, right? So stage one, the AI crafts your email. Stage two, the AI crafts your email and send it, right? On stage three, the AI manages your task entirely and the system for you. And stage four, the AI creates other agents to do even more, right? So Ben, where are most of your customers today on this ladder? I would guess like pretty initial, I would say, but and also what they're worried about at each stage. If you can please help us.
Yeah, I think it's tempting when you read about AI, especially if you're like on LinkedIn and you see like every third post is about AI and all this stuff that's going on, to kind of feel almost like AI FOMO, and feel like everybody's moving so much faster with AI than I am. But when we talk to customers, one of the things we find is we're still really, really early in the game here. And there's a variety of reasons for that. First of all, a lack of tools and capability that are holding back a lot of these projects. I actually feel that if LLMs never took another step forward, we could still see years of improvements in productivity, just by virtue of taking what we already have and better integrating it into people's workflows, better integrating it into the tools and systems that they already use. And so as a result, most organizations are really stuck with that first rung of the ladder, if you will. And that said, we're seeing like incredibly disruptive change, just at that step without ever moving beyond that first step. And we'll see people talk about, all four stages. But I think we'll see, constrained, siloed adoption. So people will say, I'm going to try to have AI do the, sending the email in this little section here for this particular use case. And over here, I'm going to allow it to do some tasks on its own. And then over here, I'm going to allow it to go as far as to spin up other agents. But those things are going to be highly siloed, highly constrained for quite a while because of safety concerns, because quite frankly, the expertise to even implement these things just isn't widespread in most organizations. And because of all the stuff we talked about before, about the inherent danger and risk associated with doing stuff. So I think, we all have to kind of avoid the FOMO here and be responsible about it. But to Ido's earlier point, if I'm a security practitioner, I want to be the one that says, hey, you can use this new great technology now because I've put in place a secure way for you doing it. And here are the use cases that it can work in. And let's try to, get as much enterprise value out of that as we can.
And to me, it's you said stage one. I hear a lot of shadow AI, but so I'm also you got me thinking there. So if I jump to the next stages for a second, so we don't want to break it down. So MCP, everybody's talking MCP nowadays, right? The model context protocol, etc. The USB, like the one protocol to connect them all. But is it 20% of the story? MCP, protecting MCP, servers, gateway, all over the place, or what's maybe the other 80% that people are missing, or maybe MCP is the thing.
Yeah. So just for those who don't know what MCP is, I like to just think about it as a more like a better APIs for AI agents, right? So if an API usually is a very structured format, an MCP allows it's a protocol that allows agents to communicate in natural language. Okay, and when they communicate in natural language, that's where they shine. Correct. And I think what's unique about MCP, whether it's the 20 or the 80%, is that we have like once in a decade event where a protocol in the security domain really catches up and everyone adopts it so quickly, right? So we should enjoy it as much as we can, and just make sure that we do it in a secure and safe manner. And I think what MCP provides is a different shift in how we view things, because eventually, like we mentioned before, the agent relies on the data or the context that it gets, right? And based on that, it can generate a very good output. And when you install or when you leverage MCP as part of your infrastructure, it means that now the agent can harvest a lot of unstructured data sitting in many different applications or company tools. And make
Unstructured or structured? Sorry for both.
unstructured and
Probably
structured,
both,
right?
but
Yeah,
like harvest a complete database, like a structure. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
yeah. So if you had to work really hard to make decisions, right? Now, and we are all accustomed to that, right? I copy just screenshots, I send the audio note that I record, I like gibberish myself into the text, and it somehow understand it without any structure format. Now you can think about it that all your organizational data, it sits everywhere. And when this powerful tool that can digest terabyte, petabytes, a lot of data and make conscious decision and powerful decision on top of that, I think that's what MCP, at least to the industry in practice, really means. And in terms of security, it means that we need to suddenly view applications and the access to them differently, right? Because if you thought that some data is really hard to get from some app or a resource, suddenly it's very easy. And not only that it's easy, it's digested into this black box brain that can do things on top of that, right? So I think definitely you need to protect it. And of course, like we mentioned before, I really believe in the identity first way, like where you need to put the guardrails on the access. You need to understand who is the initiator behind the agent, whether it's the agent itself or it's act on behalf of. And something that people are not talking about, but maybe in the future or in one of your next questions we will, is you need to understand the intent of the agent and not just the metadata of it.
That's very wow. You got me thinking. So that's very interesting, I would say. I want to. You mentioned something, and I kind of want to ask Ben to relate to that. So I just want to unpack the trust issue, knowing that the agent is actually the one it claims to be, right? So how do I know that SalesBot Dash 3000 is actually, SalesBot 3000 and not something else entirely, before granting access or scoping, etc. What should we do? Like digital identity cards for machines?
So, if you ask John Kindervag, who's the visionary behind zero trust, the concept of zero trust, he would say that trust is a construct that doesn't exist in the digital world. And that's why he, came up with the concept of zero trust. And what he would say is what you really do is you have a concept of confidence, right? How confident you can be. And it's a spectrum, right? How confident you can be about a particular transaction, how a particular interaction. And the reality is, like, your confidence level will go up and down based on a variety of different factors. And I think, if you think about when we were able to start doing global commerce with credit cards, it was when we had a certain enough confidence that the person I was transacting my credit card with was a real person or a real business, right? When both sides of that network, and that's why Visa and MasterCard have such a powerful network effect, because they were able to basically identify people on both sides of that transaction and give us confidence in that transaction. If we think about when e-commerce became really big, it became big when SSL allowed us to make sure that the website I was interacting with was actually the website I thought I was interacting with, right? And then we think about, all of these different things. It's really when we get enough confidence that we're able to do really powerful things, right? And so we're not there yet with agents, right? And I think we also see things simultaneously occurring at the same time, which is eroding our confidence in these digital systems, right? We talk about, when we're talking about AI, we talk about AI's ability to do deep fakes and to produce content. And so we're living in a world where authenticity is even hard to have confidence in. And so when you break it all down, once again, the simplest construct that works in every environment is identity, right? And once again, guy with a hammer, admit it. But The reality is as all these digital constructs change, we always break down fundamentally to these human interaction constructs, which are really around identity, relationships, being able to verify a person or a thing or a agent is who they say they are. So authentication, authorization, verification, all of these concepts are essential in this world, and they are hugely underdeveloped. And so, that's where the real opportunity is. The real opportunity here is, can we use a lot of these constructs that we had in the identity world that gave us the confidence to do e-commerce, that gave us the confidence to share data, that gave us the confidence to interact with websites? Can we build the equivalents of those in the AI world that gives us provenance? So where these things came from, who created them, that they are who they say they are, that the data I share with them is going to be secured. Once I get all of those things built, and once again, typical constructs of access and authorization and all those things, boom, I think we can start to know that, yeah, SalesBot is who it says it is. And I didn't want to misgender the agent. It is who it says it is, and that we can trust it with certain pieces of data, and we can't trust it with other pieces of data because it isn't built to know how to securely handle it. That's when we get to an era where I think we can really start harvesting the maximum amount of value out of these systems.
So I hear a lot of in-process development, waiting to see what happens, unfolding, and I'm kind of curious, and taking all those decisions, authentication, authorization in real time, right? In machine speed, so much faster than we do today, whether we have human in the loop or not. So my next question would be to Ido. So in taking into consideration of that reality, how do we do governance? So we can barely manage, the human access periodic reviews. Now we're adding agents that can spawn other agents, maybe not today, but tomorrow. And we're going to see them in our enterprise environment. So how do we not create a compliance nightmare? My friend, please educate us.
Yeah, and we see it a lot, right? Where it's really hard to do access review in the right way without being just rubber stamping everything, right? And I think it goes back to the basics. So you need to put your audit and make sure that you have the right visibility into all the activity that the agent is doing, right? You need to understand who is the owner of the agent. You need to make sure that if it leverages MCP or NHI, you are aware of it, right? To do the interaction, and etc. etc. But those are the basic things. My bet for the future is that we'll also need to somehow understand the intent of of the agent, and through that intent, we can make sure that what actually happened and what that agent is intent to do matches, right? And that's where the review is gonna be. And I think you can already see some sparks towards that direction if you read about agent to agent, the one that Google just not just but released a while ago. They have a concept there under agent card where they mention things that are very similar to what we just shared here, and that's something that is very important to have the discoverability and to understand what the agent was meant to do and what its job is. Okay, and you can already see that also in some of the architecture of multiple agents, where you have one planner and then a lot of specific agents that are doing a very, very specific task, right? When you have a very specific task for an agent, it's much easier to understand whether an access should have happened or not, at least on a call string, right? So if you think about it, it's not that far away from how we view human. We also want to understand the intent of human, what they were trying to do. But with human, it's easier because you can ask them, right? So worst case scenario, you just go to Ido and you ask it, okay, did you meant to access Monday or whatever tool we have here? And I think that's, at least in my view, that's a bet I'm willing to take on how access review is going to look in the future.
Yeah,
I love just Sagbad. I just love how we apply, human characteristics to machine in order to understand intent, etc. It's not, natural that we do that for machine language. Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I see governance as the business layer on top of security, right? And to a certain degree, practitioners focus on how they secure things. We've talked a couple of times about guardrails or rules but at some point you have to be able to show your work, and governance is really the capability to show, like, I say I'm secure. I say that these agents do or don't have access to these things. Let me prove it. Let me show how. And that may be through a report or a dashboard. But I always think about the ultimate governance question, was back in the day when, auditors would come in and they would say, can you tell me who has access to what? And this was when we were just talking about carbon-based life forms, right? And we were saying, tell me what the carbon-based people have access to. Now, when auditors come and say, tell me who has access to what, we have to not only understand, what people have access to, but we have to understand what non-human identities have access to. And we have to understand what this new type of non-human identity agents have access to. And we have to understand not only what they currently have access to, but what they have the potential to have access to. Because the reality is the agent may not exist at the moment of the audit, right? Mm-hmm. At the audit, the moment that the question is asked, who has access to what, or what has access to what, that what may not exist, but I need to know what an agent would potentially have access to risk. And so this is a whole new paradigm of thought in terms of how we have to think about governance now. So Ido talked about intent, which is, we've never had to think about that before. You either had access or you didn't have access. Now I have to figure out, what would you intend to access? And then when you intend to access it, will it actually work? And so, we're talking about adding, completely new dimensions into our thought process as to, how we determine what things can access, and then how we report on it, and how we visualize it, and how we show it, and how we report to our auditors about it. And so it's, everyone kind of thinks of the first level, first order of magnitude was like, hey, let's stop agents from getting access to things they shouldn't have access to. But that's much harder and more complex than people ever think of.
Yeah, and it's even more than that, because we know agents can create agents and can call other agents that can call other agents. And then when you go to the third and fourth level, what actually should be the access of that agent, right? What should be the scope to that? Should it be the original one? Should it have lower scope? Does the task require even larger than the origin or the root of the tree? It's not that clear, right?
And then there's one other really interesting. There's one other interesting point, which is the fact that if built properly, these agents are learning, which means their behavior today and their intent today, to use Ido's earlier term, is going to change over time, right? As we give it access to more data to learn on, as the world changes. And so even trying to profile them is difficult but important, because they're constantly evolving. So, traditional NHI, traditional non-human identities, are actually incredibly easy to profile because their behavior tends to be extremely predictable, actually even more predictable than a human. I log in every day at 3 p.m. to back up a server, right? Where now we're talking about these non-deterministic systems that are going to behave differently on a day-to-day basis. And so that's going to really put stress on our governance paradigms that we've used in the past.
This is the ultimate whack-a-mole game, or if you may, this is like the Pokemon catch them all. I don't know. This is going to be an interesting period. Okay, so first of all, just before we continue, I want to encourage our viewers now in this wonderful live session. Please ask questions as we're kind of shifting gears. We also got some questions in the DM, so we'll address them at the very end. But before we shift gears, we talked about so many things, right? So I want to ask kind of my final question to both of you. You can decide who starts. So for organizations that are watching this today, they want to act, they want to be secure, but they do not want to break their AI initiatives, right? They want to enable the business, not stop the business. What's the first thing they should do Monday morning? I want to go first.
Ben, you want to go?
All right, I'll go first. So, I often give an analogy of, when you're trying to go somewhere, you don't just like drive until you hit a fork in the road and then say, should I go left or should I go right? You put it into Google Maps, and you get your destination, and you know all the turns that it's going to take to get to your destination. I think way too many organizations are, when it comes to this technology that's moving so fast, is they're just like driving until they hit a fork in the road. They're kind of looking which direction looks better and then go in that direction. And the problem is it may actually be taking them away from their ultimate destination. And so I think a lot of organizations, despite the AI FOMO, need to take a step back and say, okay, what am I actually trying to accomplish? What's the business value I'm actually trying to do here? And I think that'll make it much easier then to scope what level of access and authorization and what tools and all the things that are required to be put in place. Because one of the things could be is, you could spend from now till eternity building out all the tools to have a truly secure, truly safe AI, and you may never get your project started. And a lot of that stuff may not actually be required for what you're trying to accomplish. So I think, there was the MIT study about 95% of agent and AI projects failing. And I think a lot of that is inherently because they didn't take a step back, understand what they're trying to get to, tightly scope the project, put the appropriate guardrails and tools in place, and then execute. They're just like, hey, this is cool, let's try it. Okay, how do I make it secure? That's really, really hard way to work and a really hard way to scale a program. So
Yeah,
Interesting.
and maybe I'll add to what Ben just said. Just do the basics right, and we all know what the basics are. I think that would be my first step, and also I think there is an
Give me the
opportunity.
basic. Give me one or
No,
two basics.
so you want to make sure, you want to make sure, for example, like we mentioned, you have the owner, you have the visibility, you have the controls in place, you have the access review patterns, just like you want it to be, etc., right? We all know the basic. There are no magics here. I think what's unique here, although, is that we are so used to come and do those things years after the technology was developed, right? Whether it's the on-prem side, whether it's NHI. Like I remember dealing with NHI like 7 years ago, right? And now it's like the thing in the security world. And here we have an opportunity to grow together with the technology and do things, at least the basic things, from the get-go. Make sure that we don't gain the technical depth that we have in other domains. Because let's be frank, like the most agents company would probably have, and I'm gonna exaggerate, will be 100 agent, right? Not more than that. That's still something that human can do manually. And make sure that it works correctly, at least the basic things. And most of the companies will probably have even less than that. And maybe on top of that, just play with it. I think the technology might scare a lot of people, but you don't need to do a lot to get the gist of it. Just dedicate some time, whether it's a couple of hours, a week, 2 weeks, to just build things. There are so many tools, and the barrier is so low to start with, because if we used to learn how to program, now you basically just need English, and sometimes not even that, right, to build things with AI. So I think people shouldn't be scared of this technology, and they should try to understand it, and the best way to do that is by learning with your hands.
That's amazing, and I think also that brings up so many kind of follow-up questions that I'm sure that we're going to have another session. By the way, got me thinking that it requires an ecosystem. So first of all, let's not be scared. I mean, you can create an app today, like agents or apps or pieces of softwares. They communicate. There's nothing the pattern, the leverage of LLMs. That's the scary bit, and I'm sure they're infrastructure player and they're security players. And I guess that lands in your domain, Ben. Going forward, securing the entire ecosystem or creating, because there won't be one player that kind of, it eats the cake on its entirety, basically, in one chunk. What I want to do next, I want to ask our lovely chat moderator, which is a real live human, to see if we have questions. I think we got some in the DM. Let's see. Okay, so how do you recommend that security and innovation teams work together? That's a cool one. Work together to create shared goals. Ido, you start now.
So I think to create shared goal, you need to find one important pain point to solve, right?
Mhm.
So everyone is on board on what's the challenge we have here and what we're trying to improve. Once you take away all the noise and really simple things as much as you can to get to the simplest MVP that you can provide, I think that's the best way. And I think security and innovation usually are very, very separated. But just like I mentioned before, there is a huge motivational high backwind, however we want to call it, here, and an opportunity. I like to use the word opportunity here to do things maybe a little bit different. So if you had challenges in the past working together, I think this technology brings the spirit of we can do everything, and it really pulls up all the people together to create something that is fun to build, but also meaningful to the company.
Very interesting. Your take, Ben, if you want to comment on this, the creative era that we're in.
Yeah, I think it gets back to the answer to the last question, right? Which is, having a destination in mind, right? And so if you can properly scope and set up a destination, then those teams can collaborate together, and the security teams can say, okay, in order for us to get to that destination, here are the security requirements that we need to put in place. And the innovation team can kind of push the outside of the envelope to say, hey, these are the things we'd like to accomplish in order to get to that destination. And those teams can work collaboratively. And once again, getting back to the thing we talked about in the beginning, it allows the security team to be not just the team that says no, but the team that's actually an enabler for a secure future. Because quite frankly, if there's a breach or a leak or something happens in an early stage, it's going to shut down these projects for a long period of time. And so creating a secure way of doing these things is the best way to get more investment, the best way to get more focus on these things when people feel comfortable and confident that they can do them securely.
Super. Well, okay, that has been lovely. I've been taking notes. I think that's rest of the question got answered in the chat. So I think we're good with answering questions, and we're just shy of the 1 hour mark. This has been went through like a breeze. And I took some notes. Just want to wrap up with that. So I think it's obvious we're not trying to scare anyone away from AI agents. They're incredible, right? But securing sometimes something that lives between a human and a machine, that's going to be the challenge of our time. And it's very, like Ido just mentioned, it's great that we're doing it from the get-go, part of for the design and the adoption phase. Another thing, like start treating every AI agent like an identity, discover them, profile them, right? Control their access, because as we said, in the post-cyber era, the only way to tame AI probably is going to be through identity. With that, gentlemen, I want to thank Ido and Ben for diving deep with us. Drop your if you have a few more questions, drop them in the comments. We'll get them answered afterwards, and we'll see you in the next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye bye.